You're listening to WCAT Radio, your home for authentic Catholic programming.
Hey everybody, welcome to Faith in Sport. I'm Dr. John Acquaviva. You're listening to Radio Maria. We are so glad to be back on Radio Maria after a little summer hiatus. This is Faith in Sport, and thank you for listening to us wherever, whenever, however you are tapping into the show today. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk today's sports topics, including our hit and miss with Ed Billick. He'll be joining us just in 1 minute. And our guest in the second half of the show is part 2 with Kevin Reilly. He's a former Philadelphia Eagle, author of the book Tackling Life, How Faith, Family, Friends, and Fortitude Kept an NFL Linebacker in the Game. He's a Catholic speaker. He's wonderful with this show, and he's going to grace us with his presence on this show for the second time over the last couple months. I'll end it all by doing weekend headlines, and then we'll talk about the role of the parent in sport. If your kid is in Little League or high school, junior high, whatever the case is, whatever the sport is, I have some notes of interest for you. I think things that'll guide you in that path of being a parent, and in particular, keeping with sportsmanship and maybe throwing some Catholic teaching there. Again, this is Faith in Sport. I'm Dr. John Acquaviva. Let's bring on our guest. He's right here, right now. He is Ed Billick. Ed, welcome back to Faith in Sport, brother. How you doing?
Good, John. It's always good to be with you guys, and great to be here on Radio Maria. Good people over there at Radio Maria. We thank them for having us.
Brother, name one city or state in which Radio Maria is listening in on.
Aren't they near Altoona, Pennsylvania?
They are. Very good.
Yeah, I always pick that out because I'm originally from Pittsburgh. So, hey, Altoona, right. What's going on? Go
that's
Steelers.
Right. We're in Wisconsin, Texas, let's see, Louisiana, of course, where the headquarters are, and a couple other states and numerous cities. Either way, my apologies for any state or city that we didn't mention along there. We just want to let you know that we're appreciative to be on Faith in Sport, and we appreciate the fact that you are listening to us here on this day. All right, brother, one of the things that you and I always do is we do what's called the hit or miss, and this is where you and I have for the week, the weekend, something in the world of sport that was good, bad, that was positive or negative, and it kind of touched our hearts or tugged at us in the wrong way. As always, you go first. What do you got for us?
Well, yesterday the New Orleans Saints had a nice football game, and their linebacker, Demario Davis, took the podium like a lot of the players do talking a game, but he took the opportunity to praise God. He took the opportunity to talk about his daughter's epilepsy.
That's right.
And how she has been quasi-cured, but at least came out of a recent episode. But he took a good 2 or 3 minutes to talk about God, how God answered his prayers.
That's right.
And he quoted the scripture. And I would tell you, go to Demario Davis, New Orleans Saints linebacker. It was out on Twitter. You could watch it. Just a nice job. Yeah, they're going to talk X's and O's, but when a religious or Catholic or even Christian person gets the podium or gets an opportunity to talk their faith, it's hats off and congratulations for Demario for doing that. And I'm going to start following him. I'm going to start checking him out because he seems just a great human being.
He seems terrific. You sent me that video. You sent it to our mutual friend, Jason Murphy, who's going to join us on the next time you and I are on the show. And I think he said something like, "Amen, brother." And I listened to it right away. I went right to YouTube and I clicked on that link. He was wonderful because he did what so few people and athletes in particular do. And that is he talked no sport. He just used it as an opportunity to praise God, to thank God, to quote scripture, to thank God for, in part, like I think his daughter had at a young age, had some
4 years old,
had some type of cancer, and she's been clear to that, but now she's having these epileptic seizures. And he was just talking about, if you knock, the door will open. Your faith is there to be had. You just have to tap into it. I thought that was terrific, brother. I think that's a great hit or miss. That's a great hit.
And it blends of the faith and the sport, what this show is all about. It's a blending of the two, and that's a positive. What'd you come away with over the last 7 days or so?
Yeah, well, of course, one of the things I'm going to report on in a minute or two, actually toward the end of the show, is when I do weekend headlines, and I'll talk about what's going on in the world of sport. And of course, it was huge in the world of sport here in America because they hosted a truly international sport, the U.S. Open. It takes place in Flushing Meadows, New York.
Tennis.
Tennis, yeah. And it's one of the Grand Slam tournaments, right? And Novak Djokovic won for the 24th time a major. It's unbelievable. And I'm going to, I may not get to it later, but the amazing thing, and Ed, you and I have talked about this, that how many would Rafael Nadal and Roger Federer have if one of the other guys wasn't there? Djokovic has 24, Nadal has 22, and Federer has 20 major, and they're literally all within a couple of years of each other. It's really impressive. And further, I think those guys are terrific. But that is actually not my hit or miss. My miss has to do with the gal who won the women's side. She's a young American. Her name is Coco Gauff. To tell the truth, I didn't do enough investigating to find out, is that her nickname? Is that her given name? Whatever the case is. But she won the women's final over the weekend.
19 years old, I believe.
I think she's really young. Yeah. And of course, so many of those women tennis players tend to be much younger than the males, that they just tend to burn out, I think. And for other reasons, they don't generally go as long as I think as some of the males. But my miss has to do with something that you would never think about. You and I were talking about it, off the show just before we went on. But there was a picture of her there's a picture and there's video of her after she won. And there's like this training table in which, it houses some of her equipment. There's beverage there, maybe a snack if she needs it. And it's right beside the chair in which she resides, like in between sets or games, whatever the case is. And after she won, she got into like a kneeling position, put her elbows on the table and had her hands folded, put her head into her hands. And ESPN, quote, I'm paraphrasing, but they said something like, look at her soaking it all in. And Tony Dungy, who works for ESPN, or has, former great football coach, he's in the Hall of Fame. He was a great player himself, football player. And he took a stab at ESPN as he probably should have. And he said, what are they talking about soaking it all in? She's praying. Her faith is something she's public about. She talks about her prayer life. She talks about her relationship with God. And Ed, that's my miss. That ESPN, even in their best moment, they can't acknowledge that somebody is faithful. We have all of these people who pray on a daily basis, who go to church on a regular basis, who believe in God, who willing. But as soon as it becomes something like on TV, you can't say it like it's some type of, I don't know, disease or it's against the law. What's your commentary?
I go back to this, and it's I've said this before, but who are they hurting? Well, what are they protecting? Some money person who says, okay, runs Disney, okay, you can't talk about God. You know who they're showing their fans, or at least the people that subscribe to their services, they don't want anything to do with God. To me, that's about half their fan base.
At least.
So they create this whole kind of, who wants to go to ESPN? Those people are ran by the devil, all that kind of stuff. They're devil worshippers. Even to the extreme right-wing people or the extreme conservative people, it's like, forget them. They're goofballs. Anyhow, they just settled today with Spectrum. I don't know if you know that.
Oh, is that true? Okay.
Yeah, and after they deprived,
yes,
like we're deprived college football games for 2 weeks. Boy, I tell you what, don't ever let ESPN run the Catholic Church. We'll be in a world of hurt.
Holy cow. I know the Catholic Church takes their time.
They want me to subscribe to go to Mass.
Ed, you used the word goofballs. I'm gonna make that the official title of ESPN on this issue. But Ed, this is maybe kicking the horse while he's down, but it does confuse me for this reason. Are people going to be offended? Are people truly going to be offended, Ed, if they go, well, check this out. She's praying. She's in some form of prayer at this moment. If you tell people, even if they're faithful people, to do something, you need to pray more, you need to read scripture more, whatever the case is, then they can be offended. But to just to
I don't think it's about offending people. I think it's about the overall woke culture to eliminate God.
But true, they're trying to eliminate God. But in part, isn't it about we might that micro minority out there that we could offend, we don't want to offend them.
Yeah, well,
That's got to be part of it, Ed.
I think they offended more people because you and I are talking about it than they would have otherwise. No, I'm serious. I'm serious.
I agree. I think that's great stuff.
Hey,
Folks,
by the way, let's hats off to Tony Dungy.
Absolutely.
I may have told you this before, but about 10 years ago, he came to my mom's CD of A meeting in Menneson, Pennsylvania, Catholic Daughters of America. He spoke, and she goes, "Have you heard of Tony Dungy? What a nice guy. He's a good Catholic guy."
Is that, I want to ask your
Tony
brother.
Dungy came to Menneson, PA.
Ed, I want to ask your brother, is that a really good imitation of your mom? Would you say?
It may have been.
Folks, I'm Dr. John Acquaviva. That other voice you hear is Ed Billick. You're listening to Radio Maria. This is Faith in Sport, where we apply our faith to all aspects of sport. So whether you are a parent, a grandparent, an athlete themselves, a referee, an administrator, a coach, this is the show for you. Thank you for joining us. By the way, if one of the things I'm going to do each show is toward the end, I shouldn't say each show, but I'm going to try to do what's called the Q&A with Dr. A. And we have listeners, we have people that watch the show and so forth when it used to be on YouTube, and people would write in and they would ask questions like, what do I think about this? Or what do I think about that? So here's what I want you to do. I want you to email me, and I'm going to give this out later. So just have that pen and paper ready. But I want you to email me your question. Like, John, what do you think about this? And it can be anything dealing with sport, especially has to do with morals or ethics as they relate to sport. My email is faithandsport@wingate.edu. Faith and Sport with an A-N-D in there, faithandsport@wingate.edu. I teach at Wingate University. And we have a few more minutes left here, brother. There's a couple things.
I just want to add to that because I know a couple of years ago, Radio Maria had a listener. He called us, or he communicated us from Uganda.
No, Nigeria.
Was it Nigeria?
It was Nigeria. Yeah, we have a lot of fans in Uganda too, Ed. But
the thing about folks, if you're listening to us, you will excite us. You will motivate, especially Dr. Acquaviva. If you just send a note and say, listening from this town.
I'm listening. That's right.
And so I guess listening from this town.
Peshtigo. I think that's one of my favorite. Peshtigo. Wisconsin. I think it's in Wisconsin. And Duncansville, or is it Duncansburg? Duncanburg. Oh man, I forgot it. It's right outside of
But anyway, we'd love to hear from you. We
would. I know everybody's making fun of me like, gosh, Acquaviva, you don't even know who's listening to you. But I remember that because my in-laws, my mother-in-law's maiden name is Duncan, so we always get a kick out of that when we go up there. Because I have other in-laws in State College area. Anyway, brother, we can't let this go. This has been a month, but I can't let this go. And I don't know who feels more strongly about this, you or I, but the women's soccer team, the national team, and there's so much to say about that, but they lost. They were favorites to win, at least go to the final game. They lost in the semis. And the big thing was so many people felt like I did. I just wasn't rooting for them. And let me start this conversation by asking you this. Do you care about the Women's World Cup, and were you rooting for or against them?
No, I purposely did not care about it.
Because of all the
distractions
that they bring to the sport.
When they weren't talking about soccer, they were talking about other things. So I gave it none of my time. I spent my time doing other things. In
fairness, I didn't watch 1 minute of it. Did you, for instance, 4 years ago, watch the World Cup? Or would you have,
Oh, I would have, because World Cup, that's big time. That's big time.
It is. Yeah. And so they, like you, or you, like me, they turned you off to the sport.
Well, Megan, to that tournament and to them as a players.
Yeah. And I'm waiting for these gals to kind of graduate out of there. And Megan Rapinoe, she's retired. Thankfully, she's retired. I think there's been no single person that has been a greater distractor from the sport they're playing than her to women's soccer. She said afterwards, this is like my miss number 2, by the way, but she said afterwards, now remember, this is a gal, Ed, who won 2 World Cups, was on a team with 2 World Cups and a gold medal, at least, and hundreds of other victories worldwide, international games that they played. And after that game that they lost in the semifinals, she was asked, what do you want your legacy to be? And she didn't say anything about the wins or her team. She said equal pay. Now, I understand that. I understand that they feel that they should get more and so forth. We've talked about it on the show, and I can bring this up again. send me an email at faithandsport@wingate.edu if you want to hear me talk about this more. But they've been indicted on how they even got equal pay. It was kind of a strange avenue that they took, but that's a different conversation from this. I just thought it was odd, Ed, that they put a microphone in front of her and she says it's equal pay. Nothing about the victories and the teammates that she met and she bonded with. I thought it was strange. Your commentary, anything more on the women's soccer team, national team?
It's another one of those things that it's like when musicians take a point of view.
Yeah.
You start labeling them and say, okay, I'm fine. I don't need to listen to your music. It's the same kind of thing. And it's sad. It's sad because how about the rest of the young ladies on that team?
Giant. You and I have talked about this. This is one of the things that bonds you and I. There's a lot of things that we have in common, but one of the things that bonds you and I in particular about sport is that we are in full agreement on what the purpose of sport is. It's entertainment. It's a distraction. That's why people are going to sit down and watch Monday Night Football tonight, Ed.
And what did Pope St. John 23rd say?
What did he say?
It's about taking the right. I may be wordsmithing or ad-libbing here, but it's about taking the body the good Lord gave you and doing it to the fullness to entertain others, but also to entertain yourself.
Yeah. Instead, they're using it as
other platforms. Yeah,
other platforms. You're right. There's it's political, it's economical, it's social economical. I understand you feel that way, but it really hurt them. In fact, I think and this could be a little much, Ed. I think they felt the fact that the United States was not fully behind them. I really feel that they felt that. That's one of the reasons they didn't win.
No, they didn't have to feel it. That was true.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm wondering if they felt it, though, if it was palpable. Folks, you're listening to Radio Maria. Thank you for checking us out today. This is Faith in Sport. I'm Dr. John Acquaviva. We have a couple more minutes left with Ed Billick. Ed, I thought one of the most interesting stories that we've covered here is Coach Joe Kennedy. I sent you that story. Did you happen to read about this? This was a guy who won that, he prayed with his kids in a public school. He's a head football coach. I think it's in Missouri. And the Supreme Court sided with him saying he can do that. It's a form of, the First Amendment, form of freedom of speech. His job got reinstated, Ed. In the first game after he was reinstated, he announced his resignation. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I wonder why.
I know he didn't really give reason. I just have to imagine, Ed, it had something to do with I wanted to bring the Supreme Court's decision to fruition. In other words, they reinstated my job. I'm going to do that job for one day. I just hope he told those students. I hope he told those high school kids. I have a feeling he didn't. Otherwise, they would have leaked that was going to happen. That was the only thing that was unfair to them. I thought it might have been greatly unfair to them, but we don't know the inner workings of that school. We don't know the inner workings of that gentleman, Joe Kennedy. But good for him for being reinstated, and he's off to bigger and better things. And now it's a ruling on the Supreme Court. You can pray. Yeah, if you don't want to pray, don't pray, right? But I like the fact that they protected that.
What did our good old friend Joe DeLamalure say?
What did he say? He said a lot of things on this show.
Yeah,
Hall of Famer.
Buffalo Bills, Joe DeLamalure. He was during the O.J. Simpson era. But he said, boy, if a guy like Dick Butkus is coming right at you, you better be saying your prayers.
I know. In fact, one of the Joe and Kevin, our guy that's going to be here in the second half of the show, I think they lived in an era where it was there was probably more Catholics on their team than there are now. But whether there is or was or not, it's probably a little more public. Where now it's probably, I don't know, a little less not known, less hidden. Like, oh, the guys went to mass this morning, whatever the case is. But we know your parish, my former parish, St. Matthew in Charlotte, the priest there, I remember, he was also the chaplain for the Carolina Panthers. He'd go over there, say mass, hear their confessions and so forth. And that way they didn't have to worry about going to mass on game day. Basically mass came to them. There's a
lot of the NFL teams. I think most all of them have Sunday service. A lot of them have, whether it be mass or whatever. I mean, they're going into battle. They ask the good Lord to protect their bodies, protect their minds. It's obviously the right thing to do. I think it happens it's more frequently than we even hear about.
That's right. Well, listen, brother, our time is out. You could hear it in my voice. I hope this was, I whenever you and I chat, whenever you and I get together, my energy goes up. I think that I'm excited to be back on Radio Maria. We took a hiatus. I think they've been listening to some dated reruns, but we're here. You're here with me. I love the fact that you're on with me on this journey. And brother, I'll give you the final word.
John, this it's easy. We're doing folks this by Zoom. Zoom, you record it, send it to the boys over at Radio Maria. They clean it up, put a little music in there, and it's a way for us to talk to you. We do it for a ministry.
That's right.
We do it for nothing. We don't get paid. We love sharing our insights, and especially Dr. Acquaviva, who has such passion for this kind of work. Whether it be his faith, he's a diehard Catholic, a wonderful father, very active in his parish, and then he takes that and his love for sports and he blends those messages together, and hopefully they're uplifting and educational for you as a listener. We like to hear from you as well, so we know we're getting a message through. But John, it's always a pleasure being here with you. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the show, folks, and we'll talk with you next time.
See you later, Ed. There you go, folks. Ed Billick joining us here on Faith in Sport. Thank you, folks, for joining us here on Radio Maria. Faith in Sport, where we look at sport through a Catholic lens. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a break here in 1 minute. I just want to get you warmed up for our next guest. He's Kevin Reilly. He's a former Philadelphia Eagle, that's in the NFL, and the author of the book, Tackling Life, How Faith, Family, Friends, and Fortitude Kept an NFL Linebacker in the Game. If you want to hear a man filled with passion for our Lord, passion for our faith, stay tuned for Kevin Reilly. After we have a chat with him, we're going to do weekend headlines, role of the parent in sport, and a couple other things. Thank you for joining us today. Hang with us. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Faith in Sport. You're listening to Radio Maria. I'm Dr. John Acquaviva. Faith in Sport, where we merge sport and virtue. Folks, if you are an athlete, if you are a grandparent or parent of an athlete, if you're a referee, you're an administrator or a coach, it doesn't matter. This sport is for you because we bring in, it's a sports show. We talk about sports all the time. It's what the show is about, but it's also about the faith part as well. So if it has to do with morality, ethics, or character, we bring in that story. Kevin Reilly, former NFL player, he's going to join us in just a couple seconds here. He's going to talk about his book, Tackling Life. He's going to talk about life in the NFL, life after the NFL. He's going to talk about, more than anything, he's going to talk about how important his Catholic faith is to him. I love this guy. I love his energy. My energy level goes up a couple notches every time I talk to him. I called him the other day on the phone in preparation for this particular conversation, and I noticed that my heart rate went up a couple beats. This man could still play in the NFL. I don't think there's any question about that. He's Kevin Reilly. He's going to join us in just a couple seconds. Folks, I mentioned earlier, if you have a question for me, if you have a comment, and as Ed said, if there's something, if nothing else, just let us know you're listening in Radio Maria land. You can email me at faithandsport@wingate.edu. Everything's just like it sounds. Faith and sport at Wingate, WINGATE.edu. I'd love to hear from you. Hey, let's get to our guest. He's the author of Tackling Life, How Faith, Family, Friends, and Fortitude Kept an NFL Linebacker in the Game. He was in 3 locker rooms, as he likes to say, in the NFL, but on his cover, he might be most fond of his time with the Philadelphia Eagles, because there's a nice picture of him in the forefront, but behind that, you see him playing linebacker as a Philadelphia Eagle. He is Kevin Reilly. Kevin, welcome back to Faith in Sport. How you doing today, brother?
John, it's always good to talk to you. I feel the same way. After I got off our call the other day, I was energized. That's what we need. We need to know that we have support. Absolutely.
Brother, you have a unique story, and I want you to remind everybody what ended your playing career, this big bout with your health, an operation that you had. Give us the Cliff's Notes of what happened, what led you down this different path that got you out of football, but maybe, I don't know, I might be putting words in your mouth, might have put you on this better and faster train on our faith. Tell us a little bit about what you went through physically to recap that first conversation we had a couple months ago.
And I get it. You'll hear the Cliff Notes here. I played all 3 sports in high school. I was captain of the basketball and the football team, got a great ride to Villanova, the scholarship. I had about 12 offers. Decided to go with a team that wasn't exactly Division I, but was Division I. It wasn't Notre Dame. It wasn't, Alabama.
Yeah.
And felt comfortable there. I think that was important.
Yep.
While I was through my high school and my college career, I was very fortunate in not getting hurt. And that's unusual for a guy that played linebacker and tight end in both of those positions. So I get drafted by the world champion Miami Dolphins in 1973. They just come off the 1972 season undefeated. The last team to ever do that. Maybe never will we see that again. I don't know. But imagine being in a camp with 6 guys that will be future Hall of Famers, 22 rookies and free agents trying out for just 3 spots on the team. I made it through 10 weeks of, I would say, really, really difficult training sessions down in Miami. 2.5 hours in the morning, 2.5 hours in the afternoons, full pads, full hitting, no water on the field, John. Unbelievable. Just incredible.
That is unbelievable.
Right before the first opening game, I get called on to Coach Shula's office. To make a long story short, Joe Paterno had made a phone call to him saying that they had a guy that was a washout with the Jets that was a former Penn State player, and that they wanted him to play linebacker. He couldn't backpedal, but what a great pickup he would be to be a backup defensive end, which I couldn't play. So here I am. I get cut on the last day before the first game. I am so devastated, I can't even tell you.
I bet.
A week later, I get a phone call that there are 2 teams that want to try me out. One is the Baltimore Ravens. At the time, the
Colts. That's right.
Colts. And the Philadelphia Eagles. Well, I grew up, sitting in the stands at Franklin Field, watching the Eagles with my dad and 4 uncles from the time I was 10.
Neat.
So it was no choice. I make my bones with the Philadelphia Eagles on special teams. And in 1974, they make me captain of the special teams. And I'm backing up all 3 linebacker spots and getting some action there. I end up getting traded to the New England Patriots and end up playing 6 games in 75 with them. Got to start 2 games, really interesting to be able to start games. And now I feel like I've got the experience, I've got the strength, I've got all the things that wherever I go the following year, whether I re-sign with the Patriots or whatever, I will have a couple years to play starting linebacker somewhere.
Got it.
Except for my dad says to me one day in early May before I go to camp, "What's that little bump on your shoulder?" I said, "I don't know. We're at the beach." He said, "I'd get that checked out if I was you." Well, to make a long story short, I went up to Sloan Kettering Hospital in New York City after seeing 9 doctors who 2 of them removed the tumor and it came back bigger and faster. So I went up to Sloan Kettering to go to see one of the best orthopedic surgeons in the world, not in the country, in the world.
Yeah.
Comes in, he's got the bedroom side manner of that wall there, 5'7", little Jewish guy, but a genius. He picks up my x-rays and so unprofessional, takes a look at them through the light coming through his window, puts them down, reads my prognosis, turns over to me and says, "This is a bad prognosis they have. You do not have nodular fasciitis, son. You have a very rare scar tissue disease called desmoid, and I'll be glad if I can save your arm."
Jeez.
I'm looking to go back to camp.
Of course.
Healthy. What did he say? I had to ask my wife, "Hey, what do you mean my arm?" He says, "You have a tumor in there that's probably wrapped around your clavicle. I'm going to try to save it, but I'm going to have to take out your clavicle." I said, "You could tell that by looking at those x-rays?" And he says, "Yeah, you got to trust me." Now, after I got to know him, I could trust him on things like that.
Of course, this is early.
This guy was great. So in doing that operation, he had done over 200 of them, and he had only not succeeded in 4. And I was one of them. And John, that was before they had MRI, so they didn't know how big it was and how it had strangled off some of my arteries and stuff. He says to me after I came back, and he knew the tumor was back because I told him, I said, "It's back, Doc." He said, "Yeah, where'd you get your license?" I said, No, I'm telling you, it's back. I can feel it. It's back.
Yeah.
It was. And that's when he said to me, "Well, we're going to have to, in order to save your life, we're going to have to take your arm, your shoulder, and a couple ribs because we have to get margins. And if we don't get margins, this thing will come back. So I'm going to have to be very aggressive." John, 11 and a half hour operation where I totally bled out. I wake up after 2 days of ICU and, man, I'm wondering about my life.
Yeah.
Looking at these pictures of my 3 kids, 2, 1, an infant, I start to tear up how I become a dad, how I might not even be here a year from now. All these things start hitting me. And that's when, we talk about sports. I get a phone call from a guy that I haven't talked to in a while. We're friends. We're not good friends, but we're Catholic buddies. He went to Notre Dame. I went to Villanova.
Who would that be?
His name was Rocky Blyer. And he gets on the phone, and he had been through some difficult times in his life, including getting a really bad problem during an ambush in Vietnam.
Yeah.
A shrapnel took a lot of his knee out and took off his front toe on his right foot, big toe.
Wow.
They told him he would never, ever play football again. Well, fortunate for him, he got 2 orthopedic surgeons that said, give us 2 years, 2 operations, we'll get you back on the field. Yeah, they got him field all right. He's got 4 Super Bowl rings today. So here was a guy that knew that I was in trouble. And I said, call me.
Hold it right there. Just want to let everybody know who they're listening to. Folks, this is author Kevin Reilly. He's the author of the book Tackling Life. He is telling us his story about what ended and how his NFL career ended. You're listening to Radio Maria. I just want to thank you folks for joining us today. So, Kevin, this is amazing. This isn't the time of, obviously, the internet wasn't around. This was pure benevolence. In other words, nothing else but Christian ethic. I mean, I'm putting words into the situation, but for Rocky Blyer, did he end up winning 4 rings with the champion Pittsburgh Steelers? He called you out of nowhere.
Well, kind of not out of nowhere. Dick LeBeau was their defensive coordinator, and he was my special teams coach. He heard about it through the grapevine. Rocky found out, and Rocky said, I got to call the guy. I know him.
Love it.
We met each other. We would play the Steelers in exhibition games, and so I'd go to his locker room, say hello, and tell him, hey, how you doing? And he would come over to mine. We had that kind of camaraderie.
Yeah.
He was a guy that was paying it forward way before he met me. Okay.
Yeah, very good.
That's the guy, and so after we got talking, he made me promise to him I couldn't quit on trying anything until I did it a dozen times. And then he sent me this poem that I use in my speeches and stuff. And he followed up with me. That was the important thing. It was almost like having a sponsor for AA. He wasn't going to let me come down that path and quit on myself.
Interesting.
It was that kind of support, John, that we need to give to each other anytime we can.
Yeah.
And this is a guy that did that. And I knew one thing. I knew I had to pay it forward. Now, here was one other aspect. 10 minutes before I went into the operation, my doctor comes down, who was busy as can be, and says, you've got to sign this release form that I forgot to give you last night. And I said, can I read it? He said, don't read it. Just sign it. Let's get moving. I said, I think I'll read it.
Yeah.
One sentence in it that shook me to my bone. It said, as the adult in this operation, you fully realize and you understand that there's a 33% you will not survive the event.
Wow. Wow.
I said the act of contrition backwards and forwards, and if I could remember my college French, I would have said it in that. 2 days after I am out of it in ICU, and I'm just barely coming back and forth, I finally get put in a room where I'm lucid. And I can tell you this, my whole perception on life changed, because I can tell you, when you think you're going to die and you don't, it's the greatest gift God can give you in this world.
Yeah.
All of a sudden,
I bet
you thought were, I want to be a movie star. I want to be all pro. Hey, that doesn't matter anymore, because you know what matters now.
Yeah.
It's how you live your life.
Folks, you're listening to Radio Maria. I'm Dr. John Acquaviva. My special guest today is Kevin Reilly, the author of Tackling Life, How Faith, Family, Friends, and Fortitude Kept an NFL Linebacker in the Game. He's also a Catholic speaker. A little later on, I'm going to ask Kevin if you're interested. You got to have this guy at your parish, at your men's group. This guy fires me up, and I'm not sitting in some men's conference somewhere. You guys got to have him if you're interested, especially the men out there, have a men's conference going on, some type of retreat. This is the guy you need. So I'm going to give these people a chance to get a paper and pen. And Kevin, later on, I want you to tell them how they can get a hold of you or your agent if they want to bring you in for a speaking engagement. By the way, He's well over 10,000 books sold, and you need to get this book, Tackling Life. He has a lot more detail there. Kevin, just before we went on, brother, you told me this great story of the locker room in the Our Father. Go ahead and set that story up again.
Well, you know that in college sports right now, some of the radicals are challenging that the coach can lead the team in any kind of prayer.
High school too, right?
Absolutely ridiculous, ridiculous. And I was sharing with you, I was in 3 locker rooms. I don't know if it happened to everyone in the NFL back in the day, and I don't know if it's still happening today, but I assume it is in some places. But right before we went onto the field, the head coach who would give the inspiring speech to go out onto the field would say, okay, everybody kneel down, let's say the Lord's Prayer. I was with, 55 guys in a locker room. They all different cultures, all different religions, all different backgrounds. Nobody stood up and said, I ain't doing this. Nobody, left. Nobody had a squam. You know what? We were all a little bit scared. We were all anxious.
Yep.
And we were in a brotherhood. And everybody held hands and we said the Lord's Prayer together. And we had one funny incident. Mike, I'm trying to think of his last name now. But anyway, the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles, Mike McCormick.
Got it.
Saying if we're in somebody's hometown, hey, why don't you lead us in the prayer so-and-so because, this is your hometown.
That's right.
On for the 3 years I was there. Well, we had a guy, I won't mention his name because I don't want to get in trouble. We had a guy that just was not the smartest guy in the world and showed it on the football field sometimes too. He was the first guy to jump off sides, all that kind of stuff. He was talented. So they called on him to lead us in the prayer. And all of a sudden there's this silence for 10, 15 seconds. And the guy in back of me, who's a buddy of his, who is not a rocket scientist either, says, I'll bet you he doesn't know it. $20, Riles. I said, you're on. Everybody knows the Lord's Prayer.
Yeah.
That. So finally, our prayer leader gets started after he scrambles a little bit and goes, and now I lay me down to sleep. I go, oh my God, he doesn't know the Lord's Prayer. And everybody pretended it was all right. They thought it was, but it's the only prayer he knew. Now the idiot says to me behind me, Rouse, I'll pay the $20 later. He thought it was the right prayer. I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
That is fantastic. Folks, you're listening to a conversation with Kevin Reilly, author Kevin Reilly, Catholic speaker Kevin Reilly, all-around good guy Kevin Reilly. You're listening to Radio Maria. I'm Dr. John Acquaviva. This is Faith in Sport, where we look at sport through a Catholic lens. Brother, what do people want to hear from you? When you've done a lot of Catholic speaking, you've been in front of a lot of people. Do they want to hear about your life in the NFL? Do they want to hear about your operation, that story that you just told, and all you went through with that? Do they want to hear about your faith, a combination? But what do people get inspired about from you?
Well,
what do you think?
John, I'll have to tell you, I just saw a statistic the other day that said, since the pandemic, we are losing 3 Catholics in every parish across the country every week. And it's only being replaced by 1 convert.
Yeah.
So we're down 2 people, every week, every parish. And I would say the biggest group there is the group between 15 years old and 25 years old. They just don't get coming to Mass. They're not buying into the Catholic value system. They're blah, 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 blah. What I try to do now when I have these men's conferences, which are mostly men, but sometimes I just spoke last week to a parish. It works for both. But I know I was challenged by a Catholic priest in a Man Up out in Columbus, Ohio, who made me feel guilty. And he started off by patting everybody on the back about what good you came to this thing today. That means you care, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And he said, let me ask you a question. How many grandfathers we got out there? Guys raised their hands. How many fathers out there that have sons? People raise their hands. How many sons or grandsons do we have here? About 4 hands go up. He says, what's wrong with this picture?
Yeah.
This is a men's conference. They're men. You know what's wrong with this picture? You grandfathers and you fathers aren't sitting down one-on-one with these young men and talking to them and finding out why they are not following the faith.
Yeah.
And that's why God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth, because you should be listening twice as much as you talk. John, that hit me right in the heart. I wasn't doing that. I got 6 grandsons. I got a son who I talk to, but I haven't got to the grandson level. Sure. I left there that day promising myself that I'm going to do this. So awesome. I challenge these men, and we'll do it in a couple of weeks at another men's conference, to do that. I want to give them a little bit of motivation to say, hey, we're losing this fight. You know, and I believe that nothing will happen to the Catholic Church because of what Jesus said in this parable. And he said, Peter, upon this rock I will build my church, but the gates of hell will not prevail against it.
Yeah.
That's a guarantee from Jesus Christ. He won't let the Catholic faith fail. But I don't want it to go downhill, and you shouldn't want it to go downhill, nor any man in this country want it to go downhill on our watch.
Awesome. Listen to this story.
What are we going to do to make it better? Talk.
No, I like that. I like that, man. You're challenging us. You're challenging me. That's fantastic. I heard this. This is kind of along the lines, but I want to share it with you and all the folks listening. A friend of mine does prison ministry, and he was ministering to this guy that was interested in the Catholic faith. And he said, "Why did you pick Catholicism? Like, why did you pick?" And he said, "I was reading this book all about the history of the world religions, and each one it said when did it start and who did it start by, right? So it said this religion was started by this person in 1498. This religion started in 1974 and everything. And then the one for Catholicism said started by Jesus Christ in the year 0." And he goes, "I want that faith. That's the one I want." So no, I appreciate what you're saying, brother. And this is, there's a lot of ways to communicate with our children, our grandchildren. I love that story though. In our conversation and prep for this conversation, you said comfort can be a danger. What does that mean? What did you mean by that?
Yeah, you know, we all think comfort is a great word, and it is. And it's a great thing to have in your life. At the end of the day, you know, I go back to my parents' era. My dad would come back after putting in 10 hours at the liquor store that he owned. And, you know, my mother had 6 kids to feed and whatever. And at the end of the day, they enjoyed sitting down and watching a TV show with the rest of the family. And I call that good comfort. But then there's a comfort where, and I challenge people out there who are into sports, watch Johnny Quarterback. It's a 90-minute program, and it talks about Johnny Manziel's rise to the top.
Yeah.
And how he fell. And here they show him, just to give you an example of how comfort can get out of hand.
Yeah.
He continued. As a college athlete, he was the greatest, and I don't even think he was using all of his capabilities. He was special.
Yeah.
He gets this bonus for signing. He's starting quarterback. He's buying cars. He's got women. He tells you the whole story.
Yep. And
he gets to a point where his life starts to be diminished because of the comfort. He's not playing as well. He's not watching film. He's out till 5 o'clock in the morning. To make a long story short, at the very end of this thing, you go, wow, what a tragedy. Johnny Manziel comes back on and said, I have resurrected myself, and I will tell you something. When I was at the peak of my, career, when I was at the peak of people loving me, when I was at the peak of making millions of dollars, I was the loneliest man on the face of the earth because I wasn't managing myself. He wasn't managing his comfort.
Yeah.
We need to manage it. And if we let ourselves, especially after this pandemic, when a lot of us became couch people, got to get back in it. You got to challenge yourself from time to time. Right before this show, I'm 72 years old. I don't like to go out and run 2 miles in the heat, but I do that. And I did that before the show. I do it 3 times a week so I can keep in shape. And I make sure that I don't let comfort manage me.
Yeah. No,
I want to say it's tough to do. I want to do it. It's little things. And I'm not just talking about me. This is what we need to do.
I hear you, brother. Listen, I promised the folks that we would share with them how they can get a hold of you. So they can go to all the typical places through Amazon and so forth to get your book, Tackling Life by Kevin Reilly. But also, if they want to bring you in for a men's conference, for a retreat, for a parish event of any sort, how do they get a hold of you or your agent, brother?
Well, I'll tell you, they should get a hold of me right away. And I'm going to give you, for these people out there, I'm going to give you my email address.
Go ahead. And I'll repeat it before we go off. So go ahead.
Okay. It's Kevin Reilly, all small letters, KevinReilly,
Got it.
4652 at gmail.com.
Got it.
Now,
Okay.
in addition to that, if they want to see, I have videos in YouTube that they can see a lot of my Catholic talking, a lot of my sports talking. They're there online. If you want to check them out, go take a look.
I appreciate that. And folks, if you want Kevin Reilly to come speak at your event, I'll bet $100 if you asked him, he wouldn't only say the act of contrition, but he could say it backwards. So you have to maybe Kevin, maybe the next time you're on, you could say it backwards for us, and maybe even in French. I want you to inspire everybody. But either way, let's encourage everybody to say the act of contrition in the next couple months. In other words, let's encourage people to go to confession and once in the next couple months. Brother, this is fantastic. You are an inspiration to me. I bet inspiration to the people listening. I want to thank you for your time, and I mean this. We're going to do part 3. You just have too much to talk about. You and I get along way too well on the radio and over the phone. Come back on when I invite you on again in a few months, okay?
John, I love working with you. I get inspired by you also. Thank you for doing what you're doing.
I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Brother, you've been a good witness to the Catholic faith. Thank you, and we'll talk soon. Ciao. All right, folks, that's Kevin Reilly. Again, let me give you the email address. So you can, if you want to contact him for your men's conference, ladies conference, a retreat, some type of event on TV, or that you have at your parish. I'm sorry, it might be televised on YouTube or not. Our parish does that, I know. It's Kevin Reilly 4652 at gmail.com. Kevin Reilly, REILLY 4652 at gmail.com. If for some reason you didn't get that down, I've mentioned my email address. Remember, I want you to contact me for a lot of reasons, mainly for questions, something that you want me to talk about, or just I want to hear where you're from, where you're listening from here on Radio Maria. It's faith and sport at wingate.edu. By the way, this is a good read. A lot of people, when they hear somebody talk about their book or what might be in their book, they don't get the book because they're like, I kind of already read the book. No, you haven't. There's a couple hundred pages here. This guy's got great stories. You can feel his energy through the book. Get that book, Tackling Life by Kevin Reilly. All right, folks, one of the things I mentioned that we do is bring you up to date on what's going on in the world of sport. I realize a lot of people don't necessarily watch sports on a regular basis. And I remember one listener at Radio Maria told me the following. They're like, I'm not necessarily a sports fan, but I like listening to your show because it brings me up to date what's going on in the world of sport. So let's do this week's headlines. In Major League Baseball, we're in the final 2 weeks of the season, and there will be several teams in the playoffs come October. But if you ask me, it'll be the Atlanta Braves and the Houston Astros in the World Series. Remember, folks, you heard it here first, the Braves versus the Astros. Just a couple weeks left in the regular season, though. In the U.S. Tennis Open, as mentioned, Coco Gauff won the women's New York-based championship, and Novak Djokovic won on the men's side. It was Gauff's first major title, whereas Djokovic's 24th major win. I mentioned that Nadal has 22 and Federer has 20. Folks, just trust me, those are amazing. Those three, we are seeing the best trio of men's, in fact, of all of tennis, all at the same time. They just kind of beat up each other, and yet they've won over 60 between them. Congratulations to those two winners, Gauff and Djokovic. In college football, one big game to report. Number 11, Texas trounced number 4, Alabama in a fairly big upset. Alabama hardly loses anybody in a decade, and that was one of their losses. By the way, the current top 5 are University of Georgia, University of Michigan, Ohio State, Texas now, and USC. So there you have it, sports news that may or may not change your life. We only have a couple minutes left, but one of the things I also promised to throw at you, and we can make this a couple part segment, but the question is, as a parent or grandparent, does your behavior matter at games? Absolutely. There's 2 things I want to share with you. One is people in the world of what's called sport management. It's kind of a cousin of exercise physiology, exercise science, what I teach. They've studied a lot about parental involvement, parental behavior, children behavior, and so forth at the youth level. And one of the things that has been found out, that is the kids, the youth, boy or girls, doesn't matter what the sport, football, baseball, whatever the case is, they take a page from their parents if it's negative. In other words, if they berate the umpire after a bad call, that gives permission. Even though they haven't been given explicit permission, that gives permission to the kid to do the same thing to that umpire when they're up, when they're in the bench, whatever the case is. The referee on the field of soccer, football, doesn't matter the sport. You give them permission. If you berate the opposing team, that gives your kid permission. Even though you didn't give them explicit permission to do that, that's what gives them permission. When they don't do that, when the parent, grandparent don't have such behavior, it keeps the kid sitting on his hands more, and it helps them have better sportsmanship. The other thing I want to mention has to do with your cheering for them. And this is going to be probably the toughest thing to hear. And that is youth at all ages, whether they're in high school or down to like Pee Wee football or Little League baseball, they do not want to hear their parents say anything to them. After the play, after the at-bat, after the game is over, even after the play is over, that's fine. The reason is they feel more pressure. If you say something to your kid as he approaches the plate with the bases loaded, come on, Billy, we just need a base hit here. Come on, just keep your head in there. Come on, let me see you hustle more. They feel more pressure. And usually pressure equals bad outcome. Nobody likes to feel more pressure, especially kids don't handle it very well. And every study that has sought to find the answer to this, the answer is clear. If you say something to your kid during an at-bat, during the handling of a ball, prior to them handling the ball, getting an at-bat, throwing a pitch, whatever the case is, they feel more pressure and they don't like it, and it usually means bad outcomes. More to be said about this. By the way, my forthcoming book is going to be called Improving Your Sportsmanship Through Catholic Teaching and Common Sense. And that book's going to come out. I'm just about done with it. It's going to come out in the next 3 or 4 months. And what I'm talking about, parental behavior at games, is going to be just part of a couple pages in a chapter in particular in that book. Folks, you're listening to Radio Maria. I'm Dr. John Acquaviva. I'm going to leave you guys with this before we go. St. John Paul II said, when sports are played and understood in the right way, they are an extraordinary expression of a person's best inner energies and of his ability to overcome the difficulties of competition. What a great comment by St. John Paul II. I'm going to end with thanking the people that were on this show today. Thank you to Ed Billick, Kevin Reilly, author, for joining me on the show today. I'm Dr. John Acquaviva. Please join us next time here on Radio Maria for more faith in sport. And St. Sebastian, pray for us.
Hello, God's beloved. I'm Annabelle Mosley, author, professor of theology, and host of Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. I invite you to listen in and find inspiration along this sacred journey we're traveling together to make our lives a masterpiece and, with God's grace, become saints. Join me, Annabelle Mosley, for Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. God bless you. Remember, you're never alone. God is always with you.
Thank you for listening to a production of WCAT Radio. Please join us in our mission of evangelization. And don't forget, love lifts up when knowledge takes flight.